The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Bangs presiding. Your eyes for the heinous Judge Bangs.
Heinous. Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Hell on Reels. Whoa. For some reason, it's mid-October, but we are still going because, as I told you all, Halloween goes till Thanksgiving. And if you don't like it, I'm going to keep it going well into Christmas.
You mean mid-November?
Yes, mid-November.
Yeah, mid-October would make sense.
You're right. Well, it's hard to know what month we're in with you, Ryan. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, Jack Bennett, who will be joining us as a guest juror and helping us figure this out between you two gentlemen. So thank you for joining us, Jack.
Thank you for having me. I believe in Halloween year-round.
Yes, the Halloween is the only holiday you can admit to celebrating year-round. You celebrate Thanksgiving every day, and everyone thinks you're crazy. Today, we are hearing the case of The People versus I Know What You Did Last Summer, a 1997 horror movie about four teenagers who, after trying to cover up vehicular manslaughter, are stalked by a mysterious killer with a hook. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, our spooky court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of the sin of being a bad movie. As always, in this courtroom, films are to be considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove, beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt, that this film is guilty, and therefore will be cast, perhaps for the final time this year, into the deepest pits of movie hell, which this courtroom just so happened to be built upon. I don't know if you knew that, Ryan. Mr. Big Ben Haslar, you are representing the prosecution. You may present your opening statement.
Members of the court, I hope you checked your nostalgia at the door and are prepared to examine this film on the facts and the facts alone in this case. Forget all about how this and or Scream might have been your first slasher. Forget about how young and edgy you might have felt watching this at a friend's house because your parents wouldn't let you watch R-rated movies. Because I can tell you, as a 30-something-year-old man who just recently got around to seeing I Know What You Did Last Summer, it doesn't hold up. It's a film that tried to cash in on the unexpected success of the much smarter film Scream by trying to rush in another one of writer Kevin Williams' screenplays out the door as quickly as possible before the flame went out. And the result is a dumb film that is so loosely based on an original novel that it isn't even recognizable, that references urban legends but doesn't really say anything substantive about them, and that probably should have been a thriller instead of a slasher. Honestly, this film would have been a great thriller. You have some drunk teens leaving a man for dead, but it turns out someone knows about their crime, and you have him or maybe a series of red herrings thrown in as to who might know, and you have a pretty decent mystery. But that isn't what they did. No, instead they drenched their idea with slasher tropes by having a faceless killer take out people who had nothing to do with the teen's original sin, just to get some unneeded blood and a higher body count, resulting in a very disappointing mystery, as every possible suspect is killed off too early, and the disappointing slasher that is riddled with too many tropes of the genre. And today, I hope you will all join me in tossing this stinker into the fiery pits of movie hell, where the movie devil himself will roast the flesh off its miserable bones.
Yes, the movie devil, Leonard Maltin. Thank you. And, did you say 30-something, Mr. Haslar? Is that supposed to be vague to us? Somewhere between 31 and 39. Very good.
It's not public record.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Haslar. Mr. Schlender, you're representing the defense, so you may present your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. And might I say how eloquent you are tonight?
Thank you. Really, I'm getting through it.
Gentlemen of the jury, in preparation for this case, I actually did indeed spend the whole of last summer spying on you. So I do know what you did last summer, and I will be blackmailing you accordingly. So please find this movie not guilty. Except for you, Ryan. You are a perfect little angel who did nothing wrong ever, and you can vote your conscience. But, Mr. Jack Bennett, the less the public hears about your ivory side business, the better, I suspect. And Mr. Bangs, it would be terribly unfortunate if word of your Jimmy Buffett cruise made the mainstream. Luckily, I'm only saying it on this show, so no one will ever hear it, and you're safe. For now. Now, the movie properly understood is actually pretty good. Kevin Williamson has been credited for revitalizing the slasher genre with the 1-2 punch of Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer. This movie is slick, it is stylized with excellent production value. The character arcs are believable and much more engaging than you would typically find in a slasher, including another not guilty feature, Jason Takes Manhattan.
Oh.
This movie penetrated the zeitgeist in a way that forces us to talk about how it penetrated the zeitgeist, for Christ's sakes. Its title demanding attention and parody, like how Stella got her groove back. So let us all take stock of what we did last summer and get our groove back with a not guilty verdict. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schlender, and I appreciate less reference to Breezeburger in Paradise. Would be best for all of us. Mr. Haslar, you may present your first exhibit.
My first exhibit is the first sort of red herring in this, which is Johnny Galecki. As you might know him, he's Leonard in The Big Bang Theory. And this guy's great. He needs more work. He's a good actor, just sort of blends in the background. And they do a good job of setting him up as the potential killer. But then they get rid of him way too quickly. The movie had a pretty good setup right up until then, establishing their crime, their fear, their panic, their falling out. And then it sets up Johnny Galecki as possibly the one who saw them that night. But then it's right there that the killer decides to kill this guy, I guess to sow confusion into the group, but it doesn't add up. This guy was supposed to be the killer is supposed to be their guilt and remorse incarnate. He knows who each of them are, and he's going to punish them. So why does he kill someone that they just happened to visit one Saturday afternoon? There's no reason for him to do this.
I got to object.
That didn't... Go for it.
I mean, were you going to put a button on that?
I'd like to hear his button. I want to hear the man's button.
Okay, I'll let him wrap it up, but I want to talk about this character.
This didn't really have anything to do with the involuntary manslaughter. He gets Max, confusing the group into distrust either way, whether he's alive or dead. He doesn't have to kill him. The answer is, of course, because it's a slasher and we need to get a kill scene in, and since it's been 30 minutes and we have to establish our Michael Myers in there somewhere. But I say you're falling into a trope land when you do this, and you need to be smarter about it. You can make something that's smart and say something, or you can say something depressingly average, and they choose the last by having this stupid Gordon's Fisherman killer scene just show up out of nowhere.
I would first point out to the jury that average is not bad. So even if you bought into all this bric-a-brac that Mr. Haslar has said, it does not move the needle a bit. But let's talk about Max for a minute and why him dying is actually incredibly important. Because the killer isn't their guilt and remorse incarnate. He is a guy that they tried to kill who's trying to mess with them. And a great way to do it is to leave bodies in his wake, affecting more innocents because of their inability to tell the truth and admit what they did.
Objection.
You can't object to my objection.
Yeah, I'll allow it.
No, it's a rebuttal. You're doing a rebuttal, sir. I'm objecting you to a rebuttal. So you have it either way, right? If you leave Max alive, these teens will continue to suspect him, and they might even do something stupid, like kill him, and that would make their predicament even worse.
No, they can't do that. Max has to die because it does establish the stakes, first of all. So this isn't just blackmail. This is murder coming after him, right? So we know, oh man, they are actually in danger. Now, the kids don't realize this until they discover Max's body later. But we, the audience, know that they're in much more trouble than they thought because Max is not compelling if he's just... Because at the time, when no one's dead yet, right? When Max is introduced as the potential red herring. So you want us to believe that the little nerd from the Big Bang Theory is going to be intimidating?
He wasn't the little nerd yet.
Well,
He's a great actor.
That's how people know him now, I guess, and that's what he's from. We couldn't place him.
He was rusty in Christmas Vacation. I'll accept that.
So I'm going to overrule this because I don't think that many people know the Big Bang Theory now.
All right, the point of the matter is he had to die to establish the stakes. Because if you wanted to believe he was a red herring, I mean, Freddie Prinze Jr. could beat this guy up. Of course, Ryan could beat him up. You know what I mean? I mean, Ryan Luis Rodriguez in this court could beat that guy up. Yes, so he's not scary. He's not intimidating. You have to kill him to establish the stakes.
Objection, you hide someone's face and give them a hook, and then they're pretty scary.
Yeah, right, but this guy wasn't doing that.
I think we've heard enough on this character, Mr. Haslar. If you'd like to continue with your next point.
Sure. I'll also add that the fisherman kills a cop for no reason.
For no reason? He had to get Sarah Michelle Gellar out of the car. Also, one last point on Max. He has
nothing to do with that.
When the jock is about to get hit by his own car and he yells, "Max, you're fucking dead." That's funny because Max is indeed fucking dead at the time. Carry on.
You'll refer to the jock as Ryan Phillippe.
The humors.
Are you sure it's not Felipe?
It's not. Mr. Haslar, did you want to continue on that line of thought about it?
My next exhibit is the impossible things that the killer does. He somehow cuts Sarah Michelle Gellar's hair while she's sleeping without waking her up. That's pretty impossible unless he drugged her, but we didn't see that anywhere. He filled Jennifer Love Hewitt's car, the trunk of it, with a dead body and somewhere around 50 slimy crabs, and she runs away. She's going to show her friends, but she's probably gone for 5-10 minutes tops, and he somehow manages to move the body and the crabs, and he cleans and shampoos and dries this trunk because it looks so nice and pristine with this nice little jack and the jumper cables sitting there
in broad
neatly.
daylight.
And this is in broad daylight, and this is while cars are going by because Jennifer Love Hewitt, when she's running to the house, she almost is hit by a car. So there's no way that this could happen. There's no good reason why they can't go to the cops and confess everything. They mention it slightly, but then they're like, no, we're going to go do something else. There's no good reason why they can't just jump in a car and drive for a few days. Jennifer Love Hewitt says she wants to get her life back, but okay, take July 4th off. He can come back after that, throw the killer off, screw his plans up, and go from there. He somehow gets 5, maybe more people to watch a parade on a hot July 4th afternoon in the exact same slicker and hat. I mean, I know that they say this is a fishing town and probably everyone has it, but they wouldn't all be wearing it in that circumstance. Under a July sun, it would be absolutely unbearable.
Hey, not if they were working.
They're not working. They're watching a parade.
And walking around the dock. Some of them are working for sure. Do you have any more impossible things you want to say, or can I address the trunk cleaning?
Yes, I'd like to hear about the trunk.
Oh, go.
All right. So this trunk cleaning scene, this is the elephant in the room here, and so I did some extensive research, and I found a fantastic article that Maynard will put in the show notes for us from moviesfilmsandflicks.com, where this guy was thinking about this scene and breaking it down. And it turns out, if you watch the shadows of the trees, this is true, he calculated, she was actually away from her car for 2 hours. And by his calculations, it takes 10 minutes to park the car and back up. So the truck takes 10 minutes to park there, 15 minutes to collect and confirm all the crabs have been collected, 90 minutes to clean the trunk of the car. This brings us to a grand total of 115 minutes. He had 5 minutes to speed away. And this is evidence that's in the movie based on the shadows of the tree. Now, why was she away for 2 hours?
It's not at all likely that they just filmed the scene at 2 different intervals in the day, right?
Hey, I can only tell you what we're seeing on the screen. You're the one who said ignore the nostalgia and only look at the facts. I'm playing by your rules.
You're saying the director's Rain Man out there. He's like, okay, we got to start this scene. 2 hours later, you guys take a break.
Hey,
I order in the court. I will sustain that he has the time to clean the trunk. Whether he would have the inclination will be up to the jury.
Or to move the body in broad daylight. Or what was Jennifer Love Hewitt doing for those 2 hours?
Hey, look, these are crazy plans and they were stupid kids, but they all worked and this is how it happened. If you start backwards and work your way back, it makes sense that this is how it played out. You know, it's like, how did nobody see them? Well, if someone saw them, there'd be no movie. He got lucky. Dude,
all right, well,
people get lucky with their crimes
shadows if you can, Mr. Schlender.
I will do my best.
He stabs Barry 4 times with a hook and then disappears with the body in under a minute with only a drip of blood left behind. When I accidentally stabbed myself in the hand with an oyster shucking knife, my house looked like a crime scene. There's a ton of blood in the human body and it squirts whenever it's punctured. How did he carry Barry down the stairs who's bleeding from 4 big hook gashes and in this crowded beauty pageant without anyone seeing him?
That's the beautiful thing about wearing the rain slicker. Stab and wrap, no blood. Some did get on the banister. We did see that there was some blood. And let's face it, that cop wasn't looking really hard. He was just kind of dicking around with his flashlight, thinking like, I can't wait to get Sarah Michelle Gellar in the back of my police car because I'm kind of a bad guy.
Understandable.
Too. Exactly. So
wait, whoa.
It's a crowded hall. Like everyone heard Sarah Michelle Gellar just scream like, "Oh, there's a killer!" And you're saying like this guy's like coming down with this big bundle in a raincoat, and they're like, "Oh, you're cool."
Yeah, but they couldn't look up there because if they looked up there, like they would see the spotlights, right? She was able to see it from the stage. If they looked down from the crowd, they wouldn't be able to see up there as well. It would have been terrible.
They wouldn't see him coming down the stairs, though. I mean, the building.
Hey, they'd have to go to the stairs. Maybe there was a fire escape or a window. The fact of the matter is, he did get out. And you have to remember, Mr. Haslar, that this is a slasher movie we're talking about, not a high drama, not an action movie. I mean, you're basically saying, how come warp drive works in Star Trek? That's not real. There are rules in slasher movies that we're allowed to follow, and one of those are the preternatural abilities of the killer. And it's not until they remove their garb that they start messing up. And we do see that happen at the end. When he's not wearing the slicker, that's when he loses. In Scream, when they're not wearing the mask, that's when they lose. These are slasher tropes. And look, if you want to say tropes make it bad, I disagree. Tropes are kind of what make the genre.
Tropes make it familiar. It doesn't make it good. If you're analyzing like
it doesn't make it bad.
Slashers as a whole are good. There are very few standouts. Most of them are bad.
I object to that because we're talking about a good one right now. We've talked about Scream.
That hasn't been proven, Mr. Schlender. All right. Let's let Mr. Haslar make his...
It's the presumption that it's good. Ergo, there must be...
You're close to being in contempt. All right, Mr. Haslar, any further points you'd like to add?
Thank you, Your Honor. My last exhibit is Jennifer Love Hewitt. Her character is very, very boring. She seems to be the most interested in investigating, but beyond that, she doesn't really have that much going on in her life. Her mom thinks she's on drugs, maybe, but that's about it. Honestly, Sarah Michelle Gellar's character should have been the lead because she has the most going on. But they went with Jennifer Love Hewitt because I guess she was more of a name at that time. I don't know. But she brings the term scream queen to a whole new level. Compared to Jennifer Lung Hewitt, Tanya Roberts in A View to a Kill is almost chipmunk squeaks. During the whole climax, literally that's all she does is scream and scream and scream nonstop. There's even one scene where she screams and that gets her boyfriend Ray to sort of turn and look at her, and the killer knocks Ray into the water. This was just silly. There was absolutely no reason for that to happen. And director Jim Gillespie is so enamored with her cleavage. I mean, hey, I like a good cleavage as much as the next guy, and that's probably Maynard up there. But, you know, stop trying to be an absolute creep, because he would just, like, instead of, like, looking at a cleavage like you would the sun, you get a glimpse of it, and then you sort of look away. He would stare at it. He'd be like, wow. Look at that. I'm almost positive some moms would find I Know What You Did Last Summer on their son's dresser, and the kid would be like, I like it for the slasher tropes, Mom.
Oh, hey.
And you're on the prosecution, Mr. Haslar?
I'm just going to say according to the IMDb trivia page, Jennifer Love Hewitt, JLH, she wanted to show off her developed body more, and she appreciated the opportunity. That's just based on IMDb trivia, which is almost never faked.
Is that from an interview?
It's just on the IMDb page.
You didn't follow any of the...
Yeah,
you got to do your research, counselor.
I did do my research.
Even if she liked it, it makes me feel creepy.
You got to do your research beyond IMDb. Mr. Haslar?
That's the facts right there.
There's a scene at the end where she appears to be wearing a push-up towel.
Yes, and yes, that leads me to my next point. And I'll rest on this point, Your Honor. The last scare is so stupid, and it was retconned almost immediately in the much dumber sequel. But if you take this out, like she sees, like, oh, I still know, and the killer crashes out. If you assume that the sequel didn't happen, it's like, did she die? Okay, that's a cheery note for our movie to end on. And if you keep the sequel into canon, it's like, okay, so this movie ends on a dream that she feels guilt about. That also doesn't really stack up to a meaningful conclusion to your film. And on that, the prosecution will rest.
All right, thank you, Mr. Haslar. Mr. Schlender, you may proceed with your first exhibit.
All right, and I did find the 2006 interview where she did appreciate that her cleavage was being shown off her developing body, so it is out there. I know it will be a stretch to get the men in this audience to Google Jennifer Love Hewitt cleavage interview, so maybe they'll just have to take my word for it.
Is it her interview that's cleavaged? Wait a minute. Reverse that. Go ahead.
Okay, so what I want to talk about, Your Honor, is how this movie brought more to the slasher genre. For you see, the protagonists here, they're not innocent random teens, and that is very interesting. They're selfish, they're immature, and they're criminals, frankly. I mean, their actions have consequences that ripple out through their lives, not just affecting them, but people in their lives. Of course, the aforementioned Max, the sister Elsa, the cop. It's a rich tapestry. There are many meats in this slasher stew.
Mm-hmm.
So,
slasher stew.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like, this is something too. This happens almost immediately right out the gate with the movie. The movie does not waste a lot of our time. We get into the action pretty quickly. The toast at the beginning there, that pretty much sets the tone, where he's saying, well, this is our last night of being immature and impractical and all that. And then sure enough, they commit manslaughter and their lives are never the same again. Their first steps into adulthood, and it is a complete shit show. They split up as friends and lovers and all that. So given the guilt of the main crew, this allows the other events in the movie to really happen, because we know they can't just call the cops because they're scared and stupid. They don't know who to trust, even amongst themselves. And what's really interesting is that the killer ends up being this guy who was never really even attached to their lives, right? Like, if it was Max, you could say, oh, well, they always treat him on the outs. If it was Elsa, you could say, oh, well, she was always jealous. What's very interesting is that these are two people who quite literally crashed into each other's lives and set off this cascading events that we see in the movie. So it's actually pretty well developed. It's pretty well defined. And we see the characters move in interesting directions that you just don't get to see in slasher movies, so it makes it very substantive. And so that would be my first point here, is that we're already looking at something that's more elevated than the typical slasher.
Mr. Haslar, what do you have to say about this film actually breaking tropes?
Well, I would agree that it's set up very well. And as I said in my opening statement, I do think it would be a better thriller in that way than it would have been a slasher. If they would have kept that first bit up until they run them over and then they're ridden with guilt and they sort of meet again like a year later, but then went around a thriller direction and not had bodies dropping for no reason, you would have had a decent film. But it's this slasher stuff that takes away from it. And unfortunately, that's the reason most people went in is for that. They didn't want anything smart. They just wanted another slasher. And it delivers on that level, but it also sacrifices its integrity in doing so.
I don't think it sacrifices the integrity. And actually, my next point, I kind of want to talk about the killer's motivations a bit to explain why this does work as a slasher as opposed to just doing like a thriller here. Because something you have to realize is that the killer is hit by the car. He's already murdered someone that he had already been taunting. You'll recall Anne Hayes showing the quote-unquote suicide note and Jennifer Love Hewitt and her cleavage telling her, no, this is a death threat, not a suicide note. So the guy has already established that the grief of having lost his daughter, Susie, has affected him irreparably, and to the point where he'll kill. And now keeping in mind that his daughter died in a drunk driving accident and a bunch of drunk teens just crashed into him, he's going to be in fury overload, right? But he's got to figure out who they are. He does have to do the planning. That's why he says to Jennifer Love Hewitt, you did your homework too, And then, since it is a slasher, we get some of these more Michael Myers elements for him, like he is stronger, faster, impeccable timing. These are all things that we come to expect from the slasher genre. So it's a very nice blend of those thriller elements, that elevated sense of character, but still maintaining those tropes to make the slicker man with the hook a very iconic killer who would come back in a couple of more sequels, just like we saw with Michael Myers, Jason, Freddy. I mean, you name it. He's kind of entered that canon. He's probably not on the Mount Rushmore of slashers, but he'd be in the visitor center.
Slicker man.
Yeah.
Mr. Haslar,
so
any rebuttals?
I do agree that his motivations make sense, but they have like a raison d'etre for his daughter, which is off screen, and none of that happens in the movie, and it has a raison d'etre for this group because they run him over. It doesn't translate when he kills Max and Sarah Michelle Gellar's sister and the cops. There's no reason for him to do that. So if you're looking for reasons to attach to him and make it very smart, you have to stop at those moments and say, well, wait a minute. There's no reason for him to do this.
Oh, I'm not saying he's necessarily acting smart, mind you. Like, he is acting from a place of some kind of primal rage. He's compelling, not sympathetic. And he's killing these innocents. Again, he's killing Max to establish the stakes. He doesn't want them worried about Max. He wants them worried about him, right? He kills Elsa because she got in the way. Killed the cop because she got in the way. Like, why does Michael Myers kill the first babysitter? She got in the way. He wanted to be a cat playing.
You're trying to have it both ways. You're trying to have him as like this killer that has a raison d'etre, and he's also Michael Myers.
I said like Michael Myers. We already have to establish the fact that he's going to have, since it's a slasher, there are going to be things that he can do that normal humans can't. That's just par for the course. It's why there's warp speed in Star Trek. It's why there's dragons in Lord of the Rings. So he's going to have those abilities. But his rationale behind it is pretty good, and he is going to kill people who get in the way of messing with these kids. Why does he want to mess with them so bad? Because he is angry, he's pissed, and he wants to make it hurt.
All right, Mr. Schlender, if you'd like to proceed to your next point.
I would, Your Honor. I've just got one last point, and it's kind of short, just to kind of put a button on the case. A button, yep. The movie looks great. It is well shot. It is well lit. It sounds great. The soundtrack absolutely slaps. The sound effects are really good. It is all the players too, right? All the actors, they're very good looking. Freddie Prinze Jr., Ryan Felipe,
which is not Felipe.
I think it's Felipe, and Jennifer Love Hewitt's breast, Sarah Michelle Gellar. They're all cast impeccably, and they all deliver in a way that teenagers usually weren't rising above in this genre, so they basically got teenage Hollywood up and comers / royalty, and there's already Party of Five. Buffy was right around the corner, so this was really nice, and it helped establish what these modern slashers would look like going on. They would have slick, handsome, good looking actors. They were hot. This era of film basically happened because of this movie. And you'd have things like The Faculty, Urban Legend, Final Destination, essentially any horror slasher movie before 2004 and Saw got dropped in our laps, So that was a pretty good run. Late 90s into the mid 2000s. It was an aesthetic, it was a vibe, and it all came together first in I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I will rest there.
All right, thank you. Both sides. Mr. Haslar, actually, do you want to rebut any of that?
I agree. Jennifer Love Hewitt has breasts, and I wish that Mr. Schlender would have kept his hands in plain view while he was delivering that point.
I talk with my hands.
Which I hadn't asked. I want all that stricken from the record. Both sides have rested their case. We will now hear for closing statements. Mr. Haslar, why don't you shoot?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to close by... Oh, wait, this is weird. There's some letters here beneath the jury's seats that weren't all hastily written after Dylan's open sneak statement. Let's see what we got here. I know how much you made on Patreon. I guess that's for Ryan. I know what you did in the bathroom. I'm guessing that's Maynard's. Let's see. I know how many times you saw Showgirls. Okay, well, that's either Maynard or Jack Bennett. I guess you two can fight over those two. But anyway, there you go. And this shouldn't be construed as blackmail by me. I didn't leave these here. I saw those being left by some guy in, let's see, what's dumber than the Gordon's fisherman costume and a fish hook?
Winter parka.
A UPS guy and a candlestick. Yeah.
UPS guy and a candlestick.
Makes the same amount of sense to me as this stupid villain did. And while it's certainly not me who's blackmailing you into voting guilty, I wouldn't chance it if I were you. Vote guilty, gentle jurors.
All right, thank you. Mr. Schlender, why don't you present your closing argument?
Thank you, Your Honor. Gentlemen of the jury, I know what you did. You all watched a movie that will be 30 years old before we know it. My goodness, how time flies. When we all meet up next year, Big Ben returning from his Japanese honeymoon, Maynard Banks having built the world's largest pillow fort, Ryan Luis Rodriguez and One Track Mind supplanting Joe Rogan as the king of podcasts, and Jack Bennett having accepted an Oscar for his dramatization about the making of this Reels of Justice episode. Well, we'll all remember what we did today, won't we? We'll all remind each other of the oaths that we took. Not guilty. And we can laugh and reminisce and say, oh boy, those were crazy times. Thank you.
Thank you both. Members of the jury, Mr. Jack Bennett, Mr. Maynard Banks, and Mr. Croaker Queen, Ryan Luis Rodriguez. You have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie and therefore should be cast into the fiery pits of movie hell. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict.
Only my therapist knows what I did last summer, and that's covered by doctor-patient confidentiality.
He ran someone over. We all know this, right? The bailiff ran someone over.
Yeah, and he's talking about a vet, not a real doctor.
This is all so much like real courtroom drama. I'm astonished by it.
Very real.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I spent the whole time trying to get out of it. So, as the foreman, shall I start the deliberations by saying, well, what do you all think of what those guys said?
What were some of the things I agreed with most? I know the defense brought up this kind of breaking the tropes, but I think at this point in time, there's usually one sort of innocent teen kind of caught up in the mix, but usually they're sort of troubled teens. And they're not outright murderers like this, but like Friday the 13th, right? They're all sexually active and doing drugs and letting kids drown and stuff like that. So like they're not exactly good kids.
In a not weird the kids way, that are being killed. They're just in a lineage of bad kids.
And that kind of thing that they were talking about the sort of new tropes, the stuff that came after Scream, basically. The idea of having TV actors who are on hit shows that were currently on. There actually is an analog to that, to movies like Friday the 13th, where they were casting people who, I think what they said, we want kids that look like they would be in a Pepsi commercial. And but that sort of moralistic thing of like the good one or the bad one or being punished for the sins, that kind of evolved over time as people started to observe. It wasn't so much a trope as it became a trend, and then people noticed it was a trend and then started like bringing that to the forefront. So I feel like what I Know You Did Last Summer is basically doing is springboarding directly from Scream. It's sort of leaving behind slasher history, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it definitely owes a lot to Scream for where it got. I do think the prosecution had some interesting points about like the crazy powers of the killer. But I'm sure he wouldn't have gone into that stage theater place without an escape plan of how he was going to get that body out of there. So his escape
powers, how does he have superpowers?
Well, he's able to clean a trunk in less than 90 minutes in broad daylight. I mean, out of crab residue.
I maintain that 2-hour thing is a bunch of bullshit. Just because you could see how the sun moved in the trees. Like these are movies that are shot in clips. That still makes no sense whatsoever that he could actually clean that trunk full of crabs and human parts. I maintain that doesn't make any sense.
I'm just stuck in a horror movie whose plot hinges so much on the specifics of crabbing.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, the whole thing is kind of a cheat, right? Because it's sort of a gaslighting, right? He puts the body there, and then when she comes back, it's gone, so that her friends think maybe she's going crazy or hallucinates it. But like, that never comes close to happening. I mean, Hewitt is very firm in that what she saw is what she saw, and now it's just inexplicably gone. She doesn't think she's crazy.
So what we're looking at is a master plan that is, hey, I'm going to try to convince this person that they're losing their mind. And then in the process, I'm also going to kill people.
Yes. Otherwise, I see no explanation for taking the body away other than removing state evidence.
It reminds me of something somebody said about the Heath Ledger Joker, about how for an agent of chaos, he's really good at long-term planning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to get too much on the Joker, but I always thought he was lying when he gave that speech. I mean, I think he exactly has a plan.
That because how much of this guy's plan would have to hinge on everything happening exactly the way that it does.
Yeah. Yeah. And the killer here is sort of similar. Ryan, what did you think of the killer overall?
Boring. Interesting, kind of visually, aesthetically interesting, but they don't really do much with it. It's very meat and potatoes, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's really not. When I look at a horror movie and I see meat and potatoes, I see kind of pedestrian, and I tend to take issue with that. I don't think that there's anything particularly novel about it. It's not like a comment on anything. It's just kind of like, we're going to try to create our own new master killer. And it just, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't fall with me, if that makes sense.
Is this the American Giallo?
No. That's giving it way too much credit.
Well, I did say American.
I think
Jack,
that's the killer. I just, when you have an actor with Tony Todd's presence and, just that grace when he comes in with the hook for a hand and that deep resonant voice or wait, no, that's a different hook killer. That's an actual horror icon. This is just a character actor in a slicker. So no, the guy's got a great face, but it's hardly an iconic image. It's a guy in a slicker holding a hook.
I think the hook's iconic, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's iconic in Candyman.
I think they're different kind of hooks. I don't know, but it's a nice looking hook. I want to defend the hook. It's a nice looking hook, and I think they got a pretty good assemblage of a cast. I just don't know.
Some pretty people.
Some very pretty people. Very pretty people.
The single most glamorous hillbilly you should ever hope to meet. With that nice spiky blonde hip haircut. That's how people who live in squalor always get their hair done. That's a point of pride for them.
Yeah.
The late Anne Heche, I just don't know if that was great casting.
Well, no, not for her look at all, but I thought she did a pretty good job. She was creepy.
She's doing an interesting job. I will say that. I won't call it good or bad, but it's interesting what she's doing.
But that's what, like, I felt like the film was it was lazy in trying to create a thriller atmosphere, like the prosecution talked about, right? Like, it wanted you to suspect Anne Heche, and the sister was always staring menacingly, even though she had no reason to be. It was just like trying to make you think all these people are suspects, and then it does the silly thing of like knocking off Max, who was a totally viable suspect for us early in the film, that we, the audience, could have been guessing would show up at the end. They kill him off very quickly.
I wonder if ending that as a Drew Barrymore-esque surprise, because I remember Johnny Galecki from, I think, Roseanne. Wasn't he the boyfriend in Roseanne?
Yeah, it's Roseanne.
And I remember him being, besides Jennifer Love Hewitt, who was on Party of Five, I remember him being sort of the most recognizable face in the movie the first time I saw it, when I was... although those many years ago when I was just a young man of 52,
You-
You were just a babe.
Please, you were in your
just a babe
you
out
were
in the
in your
woods.
50 somethings. You were 50 something.
I'm 85 years old, but I think there's a attempt at, again, it's the Scream template. Let's get one of the stars of Party of Five in the lead, regardless of whether or not that lead is interesting, which is a point that was made by the prosecution. And then you sort of, they're doing their best in terms of filling out the rest of the cast with the kinds of people that you saw in Scream. You know, you have a sort of a character actress like Anne Heche wasn't really a character actress, but you have somebody like that who is more recognizable from sort of higher quality dramas and things like that at the time. And so you have like the one ringer in there, and you shoot her for a day, and then she gives a little bit of prestige, and then you get Johnny Galecki, who's recognizable, and you shoot him for a couple of days, and that gives you a little bit of recognizability. And then everything else is just sort of, it's like that. It's like Scream Light in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's start
It
locking
is Scream
in.
without the interest factor.
Yeah.
It's everything about Scream except the commentary. It's everything about
Yes.
Scream except invention.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the same level of production value. It's the same sort of general approach to let's make a hip horror movie for young people. Let's make a hip slasher movie for young people. But in the way that Scream was commenting on the genre and then also bringing in this idea of a horror movie being maybe not meta, but certainly commenting on itself and certainly being, what's a good way to put it? A horror movie that can exist both in an ironic space and a sincere space simultaneously. This ditches the irony completely. It's sort of, it's like, it's more like the kinds of movies that Scream was satirizing, for lack of a better term.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a step back from where Scream was going, for sure.
It's the kind of movie that the characters in Scream would watch.
Yeah. Ryan, do you want to go on record first?
Yeah, I'll go on record. I do not like this movie. I don't hate it, but I do not like it. Sam, I am. So I'm gonna go guilty.
I'm a little on the fence because all of Ben's plot holes are right, but I feel like the story of the kids who almost kill a guy, try to cover up, and then he comes back for revenge isn't a bad one. Ben was right; they should have went more thriller than slasher. But I think when the thrill elements are happening, it's not so bad. And so yeah, I don't really hate the movie, and I do like the cast. Especially Jennifer Love Hewitt's push-up towel. So I'm going to go not guilty, and we'll put this in Jack's hands.
Oh, it's in my hands. All right. Well, I'm going to say I think the defense had a lot of points that hadn't occurred to me about how it does bend the slasher genre in such a way as to make it more involved than just a 10 little Indians kind of knock them off one by one kind of story, that there is more of a kind of a Hitchcockian suspense. That element in a sort of pop slasher, that's interesting. And the fact is that it is a well-produced film. It is well made. And those points that were being made about it following a formula, he's absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with a formula film, an effective formula film. So that defense would absolutely sway me if it hadn't been for the fact that I've seen the movie. And it's not good. It's one of those movies that feels like a TV movie where everybody got maybe one take. Every sort of acting choice is, I'm just going to say the line as hard as I can so that the audience can hear it. And even someone like Anne Heche, who is an interesting actor, is making the kind of choices where you're like, I guess she locked into an accent early. And the plot makes no goddamn sense because, again, every single thing that has to happen is someone predicting what every single character is going to do and then meeting every one of those coincidences and actions, which are completely chaotic, perfectly, with perfect timing. It's one of those movies that even if it didn't have all the flaws that I was just talking about, it would still just be kind of boring. We're boring, pretty people who have nothing to no defining qualities whatsoever, just kind of say lines and run through the plot and have weird big eyes that in close-ups where their eyes are really big and they're physically big and then they're just doing the big eyes thing. It's just shot after shot of people looking like their eyes have been CGI enlarged, and it's insane. Just like you get lost in these close-ups of Jennifer Love Hewitt's gigantic eyes. And yes,
I said glad he said eyes.
Oh yeah.
But also, all that being said, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a stupid horror movie. It's just, I looked this one up while we were talking and was shocked to realize that it wasn't PG-13. It's a movie for a slumber party. It's a movie for 11-year-old girls to say, oh my God, I got this scary movie. And then one of those 11-year-old girls will watch it and say, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. And now I'm going to be a horror fan because I'm going to move on to getting more and more thrilling, horrific movies. Because all I Know What You Did Last Summer does is take all of those formula tropes that we know and then just kind of does them in a glossy production. It doesn't feel like anybody cared about making a slasher movie, a horror movie, anything except, hey, we got to make a movie and we got the money to do it and here it is. And hey, Scream worked. I find it to be a cynical and kind of shallow movie. And also, man, when your slasher appears with your star in her SNL monologue, just in costume, standing there like, hey, I'm here too. Hope we can bury the hook. I mean, hatchet. Or whatever stupid fucking joke he used. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I curse?
Please fucking do.
Okay. Whatever stupid fucking joke that they used in that SNL monologue when Jennifer Love Hewitt hosted, that's not a horror icon. That's just an actor. And he did a good job. Muse Watson, power to you, man. But no one's putting you on a lunchbox, dude. I'm just saying, this is a movie that I think its worst crime is existing. So I had to think about it again for this fucking podcast. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, people of the world.
Don't hold anything back, man. Don't hold anything back. Come on.
I think this is leading. I think this is leading to a not guilty.
Oh, no, I'm giving a thumbs up. I like that. No, I'm kidding. Listen, I'm just going to close by saying this. The one thing that this movie does effectively is start the trend of ripping off Scream in movies that aren't as good as Scream. So after this, we had Valentine, we had Urban Legend and Urban Legends 2. We had all that stuff because I Know What You Did Last Summer proved that you don't have to have wit and invention to make $100 million at the box office with your 90s slasher flick. I say it's guilty. It's a bad movie. I don't ever want to watch it again. I'll watch the sequel. It has Jeffrey Combs in it.
Oh, maybe we might end up watching it. We'll see. All right. Well, then that's it. It's guilty. So let's get out and tell that very handsome judge, right, Ryan? Isn't he handsome, Ryan?
No comment.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
Yes, I have, Your Honor. Oh, do you want to hear it?
Yes, please.
Okay, hand me the napkin.
Yeah,
thank you very much. This is with a heavy heart, I must say, this is a bad movie. It's guilty.
All right.
Bad movie hell, aka Freebie.
Oh no, we love Freebie. Pull the lever. Court is adjourned.
This is Mumbly Son reporting to you outside the rails of justice. Ben Haslar, would you care to share your stupid thoughts on the jury's verdict?
Yes, I would, Mumbly. I feel vindicated. Like I said, I saw this one for the first time recently, and I'm very surprised I even knew its name because it's just absolutely forgettable. So justice was served. I did enjoy the sparring with my very esteemed colleague, though. I do think Blair Witch Book of Shadows was worth, but, you can't win them all.
Thank you. Now shut up. And here comes Dylan J. Schlender, that knuckle knob. Excuse me, can we get a word and how you feel about today's verdict?
You knob one knuckle. Well, Mumbly, I would just like to reiterate what Ben said. I always like it when we can go head-to-head here at Reels of Justice. Always a lot of fun. I gotta say, I'm a little shocked. I thought I brought a really good case. I had a ear to the door. I heard our guest jurors say I had the better case, but sometimes just having the winning case isn't enough to win in court. So I'll talk to you all later. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, he said sarcastically. That's all we have from the courthouse today. Let's go back to the studio for post-trial analysis. I hate you all.
Oh, I love Mumbly.
Poor Mumbly. Man. I don't know that Jack was saying your case was better.
Oh, that's what he said. Hey, I got one quick theory. I got one quick theory, just like when I had the house that Jack built and I had a theory that no one thought of. I have a theory that no one's thought of for I Know What You Did Last Summer. Susie was the 1995 Croaker Queen, and that's why she's not at the beginning of the movie, and Sarah Michelle Gellar is there at the end as the returning queen.
It's a very silly theory, but
I still don't.
It works.
yeah, I guess. I'm sure it does.
Just put it out there.
I guess.
Work that you have to do to make this plot sound interesting.
It still didn't do that.
It is interesting. I mean, it's all right there.
They paid Kevin Williamson a lot of money to work a lot less than you. I'm just saying. Just saying.
And he earned every penny.
Hey, he wrote this before he wrote Scream, so he did this for nothing.
He did. The author, he hates the movie.
He really did it for nothing. But Jack, you were our guest juror this week, so what's been keeping you busy lately? What have you been up to?
Oh, just carving a lot of pumpkins. Nothing. I got nothing.
Nothing. Well, it's a little bit older, but we really liked your documentary on Galaxy Quest, Never Surrender.
Yeah.
That was you?
Yeah, that I directed that.
That was good.
I produced and directed it. There's a director's cut that I hope at some point you all will get to see. And
sweet.
Since then, I produced and directed a couple of concert films. When the pandemic shut down concerts, there were some bands trying to figure out how they can still get out there in the world. And so I directed a couple in-studio concert films with the bands Anthrax and Mr. Bungle. And the Mr. Bungle thing in particular was special because that was their reunion. So they got back together and we went to a studio. We went to the Eureka Public Library and filmed a movie that you can get on Blu-ray. It's called Mr. Bungle, The Night They Came Home. And
yes.
Yes, and the Anthrax concert film is Anthrax XL, and that's also out on Blu-ray. And
You've directed a couple of Anthrax's videos too.
That's right. Yeah, I've directed 2 Anthrax videos, and I did a documentary series all about the history of the band. So yeah, I have those guys are my pals, and I have a nice relationship with the Anthrax guys.
Yeah.
All right. So everyone wants to know: is the dude's beard real, or is it a prop?
We did an episode of our show where we went to practical makeup effects artists, and Jennifer Aspinall, who did the effects for Street Trash and was actually the creator of the Toxic Avenger, she told Scott, I could make you a fake beard. And he said, I would love for you to, I would love for that. Can you make me a fake beard right now? And ever since then, I've noticed it looks a little different.
No, really? Man, I thought I was just being a shitter, but that's hilarious.
I feel like at this point it's his trademark, but yeah, if he could have one he could pop on and off, I think he'd be perfectly happy with that. So.
Absolutely. Because it'd get in your soup all the time, trying to eat soup and they would just get right in. But yeah.
On him, and we have to hide it. We have to tape it to the bottom of his neck and everything. So.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I remember when he guest starred on News Radio. That's all the Anthrax stuff I know.
That's one of the best episodes of News Radio.
Remember when they were on Married with Children back in the day?
Okay, I know they were always on I Love the 90s and the 80s and
Scott Ian is on I Love the 90s and 80s, but not the whole band.
No, seriously, I know the dude's got a beard and they were on News Radio. That is all I knew about Anthrax. I wasn't kidding. I'm tapped out.
And also they're one of the big 4.
They are one of the big 4. Exactly.
And
Exactly. Not enough love for Megadeth though, or maybe too much love for Megadeth. Not sure.
Negative rule.
So we always ask our guests for recommendations of movies that you think people should see. But since it's still spooky season till Thanksgiving, Ryan, then we're getting your heckmendation. So what is a spooky or scary or horror movie that you think people should see?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to Ryan.
I'm just telling
see your
Ryan. I'm just telling Ryan that it's still Halloween till Thanksgiving. But Jackie, it's your recommendation.
It's
Well,
mid-October, you mean, right?
Whatever.
Touche.
Even though the veil is no longer thin, I do still celebrate Halloween season all year round, and especially in my movie choices. And I will say this might be a bit of an odd one, but I'm going to recommend a streaming service that maybe not everybody has. I would recommend that everybody sign up for the Criterion channel. And even though Criterion is famous for sort of highbrow releases of Kurosawa and Bergman and the kinds of films that they don't want to see lost to history, so they preserve.
Armageddon.
They also have a channel. They have a streaming channel where they'll put all kinds of collections on there, and they're doing Noirvember now. They're doing a film noirs and stuff. But also, I noticed when I went on there that all of their horror movies that they had for October are still up. And so they have these collections. It's crazy because it's Criterion. You think of it as being very sort of, shishi and maybe even a little academic. And yet, if you go on the Criterion channel right now, you can stream Basket Case. You can Dead and Buried, the Gary Sherman movie from 1981. Blackula. They got a vampire section. Listen to the vampire movies they have. Nosferatu, Dracula, Spanish Dracula, The Velvet Vampire, Daughters of Darkness, Isle of the Dead, Fascination, The Living Dead Girl, Near Dark, for crying out loud. A Girl Walks home alone at night. Thirst, one of my favorite movies. Chan-wook Park's Thirst, in which vampirism is a metaphor for literally everything. And Let the Right One In, Blood and Donuts. So
the nude vampire?
Oh wow. Yeah.
I don't know. Do they? They probably do.
on culturally relevant.
On their 80s horror section, they've got Tetsuo the Iron Man streaming, for crying out loud.
Well, of course. That is Criterion for sure. That's Criterion meat.
And then of course Society, Brain Damage, the remake of The Blob by Chuck Russell, The Lair of the White Worm. This thing is the gift that keeps on giving. So when you're done streaming, all of those, The Man Who Knew Too Much with Peter Lorre or whatever it was, you can then jump directly into watching movies like The Hidden with Kyle MacLachlan, which is one of the great 80s classics, genre busting before that was even a term. So yeah, sign up for Criterion.
I know Ryan is always signed up, and I think Big Ben is too.
No, I go off and on it, but I definitely... It's definitely in the rotation of my streaming services.
Yeah, use promo code Reels of Justice to get an error message.
No, error message. I'm gonna say Ryan and Ben are your Criterion Channel guys. Schlenzo and me, we're freebie guys. You took shots at them. But
I gotta say, especially with my upcoming recommendation,
we like the freebie.
The thing about freebie is when somebody's about to button the scene. And then it goes to a commercial and then comes back from the commercial just for the last line of the scene. That's always a good time.
I mean it takes all kinds.
Yeah.
So
the free does a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, exactly. And then it goes to a commercial for like Tide or something. And then after a few minutes of being like, go on this cruise, do this, do that. And comes back and the guy goes, it's your baby. And then that's, what? No. What?
I knew it. I think it's keeping you in suspense throughout the whole break. Big Ben, you were victorious today. So what is your recommendation?
Throughout this last October, I've been marathoning a 90s horror film a day, and I Know What You Did Last Summer made an appearance, and I curated all that into the top 13 list on my Letterboxd page, in which I Know What You Did Last Summer did not make an appearance. But out of all those, the film that I felt held up the best was 1999's The Sixth Sense. And nowadays, everybody knows about that twist at the end, but The Sixth Sense is so much more than that. It crafts a strong narrative about longing and human connection, and it's one of those stories where the tension slowly builds as the layers to the core are progressively removed. It has ever-present atmosphere that keeps you wanting to know more about Malcolm and Cole's relationships, as well as the relationships that they have to the people that they live with. These are roles that Bruce Willis and Haley Joel Osment seemingly sink into effortlessly, particularly Osment. The directing shows how much can be done with a smaller budget by being focused solely on the narrative. And getting back to that twist, even knowing what it is, it's so great. So often when a film has a twist, it's all about how the producers managed to fool the audience. And this does that, but it also completes the narrative in a power punch that's not a trick, but where Malcolm and Cole's stories were inevitably going the whole time. So if you haven't seen it, or you haven't seen it in a while, you can go ahead and find it on Hulu, or perhaps in your dusty DVD pile, and give it a reevaluation just to see how much it still stands up. You can also look on my Letterboxd page for my personal top 13 genre, or you can play Movie Roulette with the recommendations of Justice List that I keep up to date. Just pray it doesn't spit out DC's League of Super Pets.
It might. It might. But that top 13, missing the Faculty. So I poo it.
Maybe it's 14.
I poo-poo it. If you put the Faculty on the list, then we could talk. Love the Faculty.
Hey, explain to me, why are they alive at the end? That doesn't matter.
Why are they alive? The Super Pets?
I
I don't know what you're talking about.
I just remember not understanding, like, wait, did they turn into aliens? Or why did the people who get turned into aliens alive at the end? Or anyway, spoiler.
No, you're thinking.
Oh,
of,
the Faculty. Well, the slugs fall off. You know, they killed the top bug. It's all. It doesn't matter. You shouldn't think about it that hard.
The killer was in a slicker.
It was in a slicker. Schlenzo, what's your recommendation?
All right. Well, this is just the natural progression going from Criterion to one of Shyamalan's greatest. And I'm going to be extra indulgent with this recommendation since I did do the case. And it is actually part omnibus and love letter. Yes, Ryan, move over in my heart and make room for my new crush, Louisa Warren. It is true. I am proclaiming my feelings for this director for reasons that will soon be obvious. For you see, Warren has directed not one, not two, not even 5, but 3 living Scarecrow movies. In 2018, we got Bride of Scarecrow and Curse of the Scarecrow. And in 2019, and Maynard, this is the one you used for the poster, Scarecrow's Revenge. Scarecrow's Revenge is about Vikings fighting a witch/scarecrow. And I think I speak for all of us when I say we look at the oeuvre of horror movies, and it is manifestly obvious that living scarecrows are the bedrock foundation. For you see, they're more than masked killers. They're almost human, definitionally supernatural. Living scarecrows hang in the cornfields of our minds, ready to stare into our souls with their black burlap eyes as they thresh the lives from our bodies. So, a toast to living scarecrows and director Louisa Warren.
I just hope they don't fall asleep in bed smoking. So my recommendation this week is a movie I just couldn't stop thinking of all the way through I Know What You Did Last Summer. And if that's the hallmark of a really good parody, then I have to recommend Scary Movie from 2000. Riffing on several of the more popular 90s horror movies, including Scream, The Blair Witch Project, and of course, today's movie, Scary Movie contains a lot of scenes which are arguably as iconic and memorable as what it sought to ridicule. And maybe that's because it didn't stray all that far from the truth. It was very difficult to watch Jennifer Love Hewitt spin around in a circle in the middle of the road, screaming, "What are you waiting for?" and not thinking of Anna Faris doing basically the exact same thing, just a little sillier, and how that somehow made what Hewitt was doing even funnier. You know, a lot like our movie today, my recommendation spawned a litany of sequels, which, apart from the second, should be avoided by the general public. A couple of them even feature Charlie Sheen. Ugh. But you can't fault the original for that. Scary Movie is currently streaming on Stars, but since I know nobody subscribes to that, you're shit out of luck.
Fun fact, Scary Movie's original title was Scream If You Know What I Did Last Halloween.
Oh, yeah, and then they did eventually do a parody. I think it's Scream If You Know What I Did Last Friday the 13th.
Shriek.
Yeah.
Shriek. They did Shriek.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah, last Friday the 13th, I think. I know one parody finally took that name up.
And
Maybe that's...
Scream's working title was Scary Movie.
Oh, yes, I did know that one. Rye Guy, why don't you send us on home for the whole Hell on Reels season? Can it keep going, Ryan?
Yeah, okay, let's keep going.
Yay!
My recommendation this week is a weird one. It's been 13 years since stop-motion pioneer Henry Selick made a movie between The Amazing Coraline and 2022's Wendell and Wild. Co-written and produced by Jordan Peele, there is no shortage of ideas at play here. I'm not even certain that it coalesces into something solid, but you have to support your favorite filmmakers any way you can, despite the seemingly unavoidable messiness. Wendell and Wild is currently streaming on Netflix, and if you have 100 hectic minutes to spare, you'll probably get something out of it.
Is it kid appropriate? Can I watch it with the kids?
It's a little.
Yes, you can watch it with kids. There are some thematic elements, but nothing that would traumatize a child.
I'd say not on the level of scariness as Nightmare Before Christmas, but there's a little more thematic kind of weighty stuff about death and loss and things like
that. They love death. They can't get enough of it.
Like a lot of stop motion movies, it's one of those ones where every shot of the movie is just a visual feast, and it completely overloads you with design.
It's immaculate. It looks immaculate. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's based on a book by Henry Selick and my buddy Clay McLeod Chapman.
There you go.
Isn't it an unpublished novel though?
Yes, I believe it was turned into a movie instead.
Oh,
see. But if you're friends with him, you can go over to his house and see the prototype. Obviously,
right now.
There you go. But with that, we are all out of show and all out of Hell on Reels season. I don't want it to end, but don't worry. We'll just take a brief Thanksgiving break, and then we're going right back to horror movies. I don't care.
You ended on "I know what you did last summer."
Well, what
you can't plan it this way.
Are we going to end it on a high note, Jack?
You play the hand you're dealt.
But you got to play the cards that are dealt you. So we had to pick a really bad movie to end it on. I hold you responsible for it. And anyway, we want to thank our guest Jack Bennett for joining us. Thank you for suffering through this movie, Jack.
Oh, I didn't watch it.
Oh, you have better. You have better watched it. But we want to thank you for joining us and being such a great juror. And we'll get you back here and you'll be ready to lawyer up next time.
Thank you for having me. Such a blast, and you all are hilarious.
Yeah, or be judge. We get you one of those wigs or one of those Scott Ian beards, and you could be like a sweet judge. And we will hope everyone else will join us again as well as the reels of justice keep turning.
Count it,
Slicker Man.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.